we're at 2 minutes in, so we'll get started. First off, thanks for everybody for taking the time to attend here today. Hopefully what I go through will be useful for you. I was hoping to have my associate over at Binary Stream, Khaled Nassra, join us in here, and he still might pop on, but I think he had something come up last minute, so looks like he just got me here today, going through things for at least the majority of it. What the purpose of this webinar is, the simple purpose of this webinar is figuring out ways to set up your business to grow more rapidly. More specifically, this is going to focus on franchise type organizations. Now, when I say franchise, that might mean just an organization that has multiple locations. But so if you're not exactly a franchise, you'll probably still find some benefit here, but franchising is what we'll be talking about the most. And even more specifically than that, we'll be talking about the Dynamics ERP space specifically. So that might be Dynamics GP for you. That might be Dynamics BC. We'll be talking about the differences between the two and kind of what the positives and negatives are of each when you're trying to set up all of your processes for a rapid growth process. We'll also be going through a sort of pseudo case study of a company that I've been working with over the years, Mammoth Holdings. That is sort of what drove this entire webinar idea, in the sense that, I've been able to watch them sort of add things to their ERP stack, see how they were able to set themselves up to grow more and more. And I thought it was interesting and worth sharing kind of how they've architected both their setup in GP and their migration over to Dynamics BC, while still trying to keep all the tools and things that we'll talk about here today. It looks like we had Khaled join you there, Khaled.
Yeah, sorry about my technical challenges. Not a frequent Zoom user.
Yeah, I hear you. It was a little last minute there. So anyway, if I didn't give the full intro on myself, my name is Kevin Pritchard. I work at a company called Fidesic. Been here for over 10 years and been the product owner for a handful of years now at this point. So it's been kind of cool to be able to see companies transition themselves, as well as be a part of that at our own firm. And we've got our extra special guest from Binary Stream, Khaled Nassra. And Khaled, if you want to give a quick little intro, maybe that would be helpful for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's an honor and always a pleasure to talk with you and the rest of the Fidesic team. If you don't know Binary Stream, we develop quite a few solutions, namely multi-entity management here, but also our subscription billing suite and lease management products. We've been collaborating with Fidesic for a few years now, and it's always awesome to see the success that we can drive together and figure out how we can have the best setup for companies to optimize their growth.
Yeah, it seems like that's what we've really realized is there is like a stack of things. Some of them are our products, some of them are not, but there's a way to like set up a stack that works really well in franchising space and in the space where people can actually focus on growing their business. So who's this webinar for? Like I said, multi-location / franchise companies looking to optimize that growth. I've alluded to this, but if you're a company on GP looking to stay on GP, that's great. We've got tools for you. Happy to talk about it. If you're a company on GP who's considering a move to Business Central, this should give you some info on how that looks and how that can work. And if you're already on Business Central, everything that we're going to talk about here today is going to be applicable to that as well. So hopefully that is helpful for you in terms of set up for who this is for. The overview, we'll go through why franchising growth is important. We'll talk about Mammoth Holdings specifically a bit. We will go through some of the problems that they face that I ran into while working with them, and the different solutions and processes that we were able to put together to help them fix these issues. Then we'll kind of go more general on GP side. We'll talk about their leap into BC, that whole transition process, and then some of the other options that are available for BC that I think are helpful for growth. We do have some time at the end for Q&A. We're not going to be going a full hour today. I know that originally we had this scheduled for a full hour, but we'll try to keep it as short as we can for you. Keep it concise. So we're talking about franchising because it's a great sort of microcosm of an industry where it's very easy to grow fast. That is why people franchise. It's the way that you can expand quickly. It is, all of these lessons are applicable to other types of companies that are also trying to grow fast. But the interesting point on all of this is that 86% of those companies that are in that SMB space are still doing the bulk of their accounting manually. So they're still keying things in, they're still manually sending things around. So if you're one of those companies that's still doing that, don't fret. It is the way that the world still works largely. And that's why that's the purpose of this, is to talk about the ways that you can automate those things and remove that cap for your growth directly. So why focus on accounting and accounts payable specifically? It makes sense to focus on this mostly because, one, you can really have a outsized impact on your efficiency. It is a space that is ripe for transformation right now. And a lot of people aren't aware of all the options that they have to kind of make things run more smoothly. So there's a lot to be gained. If you're going to grow, of course, you're going to be creating more accounting. That's just the way things go. You're going to have more paper. You're going to have more data. You're going to have more transactions. So there's no way to grow without growing at least the scope of your accounting a bit. And if you can set this stuff up before your rapid growth, you won't outgrow your capabilities, which is something that I've seen over the years, that people will suddenly realize that they have a process that absolutely cannot keep up with what they're doing. And that, as you might imagine, is pretty problematic. And at the end of the day, accounting is a core function that you can't really ignore. There's no way to have a business without it. So to lay the scene a bit on the case study that we'll be using as our framework here today, is the Mammoth Holdings story. So I started working with them about 3 years ago at this point. They've been around in this form for a little over 4 years. And 4 years ago today, they had 8 individual franchise locations. The opportunity that came their way, as I'm sure you've seen in your local area, wherever you live in this country, is that the car wash industry is booming. The new model where you can have your monthly service and get as many car washes as you want has really set up that whole industry for a nice recurring revenue channel that has exploded growth, exploded the opportunity there. And they took the call, basically. They saw the opportunity there and decided to go all in on expansion. And as of this, I'm hesitant to put a solid number on it, but they have at least 130 locations at this point. And that's just in a 4-year growth period. And the important thing for this is in 2022, they transitioned from GP to BC. And they brought the things that they helped set up in GP to continue that process along. So they were lacking some tools to grow. When I started talking to them, they were basically stock GP, with the exception of they were in the process of rolling out MEM, which we'll have Khaled speak to a little bit here shortly. But they're in the process of trying to figure out how to grow without, totally exploding their process. And the quote from this one is, before we were doing this, everything was very manual and time consuming. It required a ton of bandwidth, and, that bandwidth gets limited as time scales. So the obvious solution, which a lot of people do, and I've seen a lot of people do, is you can just throw staff at this problem, right? Just hire more people and keep more data and you're all good. The problem with that is, if you've been around the past couple of years, you know that that's not a good solution. Staffing's been a bit of a nightmare for even professional level organizations. It's been tough. In the car wash space, I would imagine it's been even more tough, and trying to find AP clerks is a bit tough right now, that's for sure. So the answer to this is to find those things where you can automate as opposed to hire, and that's largely what we're going to try to talk about here today. So phase 1 of their growth process was getting from the initial 8 up to 65 locations. They did that all on GP, and they did that by building out their GP in a custom way that I think is a nice, unique stack that is helpful for them. So they found some ISV partners. First one on deck for them was Binary Stream, and they added in multi-entity management into their platform. And multi-entity basically is the ground floor that you need to be able to start growing. So I don't know if you want to chime in a bit about sort of the reasons why you would want MEM in your stack at this point, Khaled.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. I think for Mammoth and for so many others, even some of our other joint customers like MB2 Dental, we see that in periods of rapid growth, they really have to have a system that is flexible enough. You mentioned at the top the statistic about how many companies in SMB are really hindered by their solutions, which is a tragedy, I think. Really, if your systems are keeping you from growing, that's the first sign of systems failure. Your solution should empower you to grow more and should make your overhead shrink as you grow and have that like economies of scale idea grow with you. So with MEM, companies are able to consolidate a lot of the effort, really be able to centralize things, including their AP management, but then also have even things that we don't think of too often, like being able to negotiate better vendor contracts. If they see all their expenses with a single vendor in one location, rather than spread out across all of them, they can really flex that corporate muscle and say, you know what, no, we've spent like X amount of money with you last year. We should be able to negotiate a better contract. So I think that's a big way where it does lay the groundwork and customizes everything to suit their needs specifically.
For those not in the know, the real base level explanation of multi-entity management that, as I see it, is it takes everything that people would normally split up into separate databases for like legal reasons or, you know, complexity reasons, and just zips them all together in a way that makes a lot of sense, which is great. As when I get to work with people that already have MEM set up, it's so much easier to build out a solution on top of it. And I feel like that's a thing that doesn't often get talked about, is how your tools can work together to be more efficient than any individual one on its own. And if you don't have that ground floor laid out of like a simple master record in your ERP system, whether that is BC or GP, it makes it tough to build solutions on top of. It is the classic house of cards analogy that, you know, if your base isn't good and you're just stacking on automation onto an already complex process, it can get worse before it gets better, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
The types of things that they were on their list to fix were, you know, one, get that ground floor set up, add that reporting features, add those MEM ground level things that really enable growth. And then on top of that, build out some additional features. The things on their list were data capture on their invoices. That's an obvious one. Being able to pay out of ACH in an easy and fast way, and getting rid of check fulfillment entirely, which is all the rage right now. And people that I talk to, is suddenly the world woke up and realized that there's probably a better way to printing checks than continually buying toner. So we'll get into that a little bit here. We already talked about the features that were important to them in MEM specifically. Again, it's hard to overstate how much it can help eliminate those redundant type tasks. I've seen so many people dump so much time just switching accounts in GP. It's kind of wild. And MEM, in talking to companies that use MEM and don't have MEM, a lot of them don't even know they have it, because it's just like so seamless in GP that it just, they assume that that's how the rest of the world does things too. But I can tell you, if you're struggling swapping between accounts and trying to figure out, you know, consolidated reports in GP, that MEM can really make a big difference on that front. And then the other thing that I think MEM does a good job of, which I'd love to hear your input on a bit more too, is how MEM can help with the fact that everything is going to be changing. Growth by nature means that everything is going to be changing, which means new GL codes, new vendors, new everything. And that is a thing that I don't know a ton about. I know that MEM helps it, but I'd be curious what your input is on that one, Khaled.
Absolutely. I think it helps a ton. Like you mentioned, you can think about it as this very simple example. We'll go back to having a vendor. And let's say you change, one of your vendors changed their name, something very simple. They go from ABC Co to maybe XYZ. And if you want to make that change in every single entity that you have, that's a big headache, first of all. And second, it's a lot of error-prone processes. So even something like that you have to change on the entity level, you can manage from a central location. You can have the changes reflected within each company. But then in day-to-day workflows, if you have let's say, a transaction between your two companies. That's going to happen more and more as you have more locations. If you're franchising, maybe you have a cost center and you have all the different entities that get material from that cost center. If you want to have a transaction, you have to post things, do your due tos and due froms, and conduct your accounting business legally and legitimately. And if you want to do that, multi-entity management is really the best answer there, because we do have intercompany transactions. So it allows you to avoid the repetitive and manual and error-prone tasks of managing your data and maintaining good data integrity. It adds a better layer of security, because if you have a group of people that should only access some data but not all of it, you can do that as well. And then for day-to-day workflows, you have all that automation as well on top.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really considered how, in MEM, it feels a lot more just like a regular GL transaction when you're doing anything intercompany, right? It's not necessarily this big complicated one database to another. And of course, there's the like vendor part of it too. When you pay AT&T and they change their billing address on you,
Yeah.
should be quick, right? But if you've got 100 different entities set up, that's an all-day job for some poor AP clerk to go through and make all those modifications. And again, it's funny hearing you say that, because it's like the stuff that we build on top of it. It makes perfect sense that having it simplified on the database level like means you're more powerful in the other things you can build on top of it. So when we're like building out a workflow for approval on top of it, if we can like architect it in a way that it doesn't have to be reinvented every time that a new piece of data has changed, and we can do it in a way that it's built on top of the way that you have things organized in MEM, as opposed to having to like bolt something on top of it. We can just say, all right, it's this MEM entity, it gets routed this way, which is I think another great way to help with that constantly shifting sand of new systems and new vendors and new locations. Is you have to have a stack that like everything flows up to from the bottom up, as opposed to you have to constantly update. And that's the other note that I have on this is like, if you're going to add a third party add-on to this and you're constantly changing, you better make sure that everything is syncing, because you're not going to want to manage two databases. And then if you have if you don't have multi-entity and you have multiple databases and multiple ISVs, it just multiplies so quickly in terms of the effort to just do the most basic things, that updating a vendor record really gets rough as that goes on. Specifically the type of things that they added into GP that we were able to help out with. Thing one is invoice data capture. You probably heard about it. You probably have had some vendor call you and talk to you about it. But I've been in the space for a long time, and it has really, really improved in the past 5 years. Even in the last 2 years, it's gotten so much better. So if you haven't looked into data capture on your invoices yet, and you're still keying things in, now is the time to do it. I'm not like, obviously I work for a company that has data capture that I think is really good, but the whole industry has shifted on this. And even the ones built in directly into Business Central are pretty good at this point and can make a huge difference and really simplify things. And that's one less person that you have to scale up as time goes on. You can just throw more transactions at it and those get processed quickly. So if you're on GP or on BC, anywhere in that Dynamics ERP stack, I don't really think you need to be keying invoices at this point. I think there's enough options out there that you can find one that works for you. And that's just makes growing so much easier when more data doesn't make your life worse. The other thing that they were interested in is a way to pay by ACH, which is something that we were able to help them out with. Again, this goes into scaling in the sense that it's easier to pay by ACH, but the important things to keep in mind with ACH scaling, which definitely comes up if you have multi-entities in the sense where you're paying out of many bank accounts. That process can get out of control really quickly as well. It's just like everything else we talked about, that when you have one company, one entity, your process can be kind of bad and it's fine. You can throw an ISV on top that doesn't have that tight an integration and it's fine. But once you've got multiple entities, once you've got multiple bank accounts, you really have to have things set up that are fully automated. And a thing that I think is underrated in this part of the process for ACH processing specifically is make sure your files are encrypted from end to end, because the more files you're dealing with, the more times you're uploading, the more opportunity there is for somebody to mess with a file that isn't encrypted, and you don't want to deal with that. It's going to slip through the cracks. If there's an opportunity, you might miss it, which is not where you want to be for sure. And then the final thing that we added in GP, which I've alluded to that everybody's starting to realize, is paper check fulfillment. There are lots of options out there as well for paper check fulfillment. The key things in my mind are, one, make sure that you have an approval process built into it, because you're going to need it for audit. If you're the type of company that still has the CFO look at the little check and has the invoices stapled to the back of it and physically signs off on it, you're going to want something like that in the case of audit, even if it's a fully digital process that somebody else is handling that fulfillment. So make sure you still have that. And then the other important thing on this transition to outsourcing paper checks generally is have a path for people to sign up for ACH. Give them an opportunity to do so, and then that's one less check that you'll ever have to send until the end of time. And that makes things cheaper, makes things simpler, makes things more streamlined. So to kind of zoom back out. So we talked about, those are the things that Mammoth Holdings was looking for, and those are the things that Binary Stream and Fidesic was able to provide for them, to give them that platform that was allow them to grow up to 65 things. GP more generally, there's some different options there, right? Like there's hosted GP, there's on-prem GP, there's like GP through a web app. They're all different. They all have their pros and cons. I think if you have a hosted version of GP on a reputable reseller, it might be just as easy to scale it as it is on Business Central. They can give you more resources. They can, slide that RAM meter up for you, and things will keep running quick, and you can keep adding users, and it might be fine. That said, there's still on-prem installations of GP floating around out there, and I can tell you from experience that some of them are horrifically slow, and I don't know how anybody uses them, because you start adding users, the database gets bigger. Nobody wants to invest in a bigger server or a more powerful server. And as time goes on, it just becomes cripplingly slow. And I don't know, it blows my mind. I've seen some GP setups that I don't know how anyone gets anything done in them. So if you don't have the internal IT to manage that, I don't think on-prem GP is for you. And that's one of the great advantages of moving to BC, is that whole requirement goes away. Like it works, it scales. You don't have to worry about that at all. And like I mentioned, there are some web versions or remote access versions of GP, which are fine. They can be good or bad. Just make sure you have a good partner with them. And again, it all comes back to the IT stack on that. Make sure that that is something that you're optimizing as well. So that's just the native stuff. Then there's the things on top of that. We've talked about Fidesic. We've talked about MEM. Another one that is all the rage right now that I think is really good is a company called E1 PopDoc. They give you tons of customizable reporting options, lots of different views. They also made Smart List Builder for GP, which you might have in your GP system if you're already using it. But the new Smart List Builder is PopDoc, essentially. It's sort of the more grown up, more modern version of it that has a lot more features. I think that's a really good one. I don't know. Do you have any experience with E1 team on PopDoc, Khaled? Have you talked to them much?
I know their Boom It's Integrated ads.
Yep.
It's really a great solution. I completely agree, Kevin, that having the right kind of ISV solutions can make your environment your own, and that's ultimately what matters. But A1's definitely one of those really great products that I think pretty much anyone needs it, just to optimize their visibility, have access into any kind of report that they need themselves. And then if they want to integrate everything and make sure it's all talking to each other really smoothly and easily, then it's a great tool for that as well.
Yeah, they have a whole host of tools that I think are really useful for people trying to prepare for scale too. Obviously, Smart Connect, which I accidentally mentioned, I will now intentionally mention because Smart Connect is also really, really powerful. You can connect anything to anything essentially. And it's all done in a way that you don't need to be a developer. I know I've used it. I've done some of the more technical side of it. Obviously, a totally not technical person probably couldn't do it, but you don't need to be a developer. I can personally vouch for that. Um, and the key takeaway of this is like at this point of GP's life cycle, there are so many ISVs out there and so many products that I think you have to be taking advantage of them. If your plan is to stick on GP, which I think a lot of people are doing, and I don't have a problem with fundamentally, um, you should be shopping for different options on it though, because there are so many options out there that can help make your life easier, that are designed for your industry, that are built for your specific tasks that you have at hand. There's so much out there. And in GP space, the way to do that is talking to your partner. Talk to your partner, explain to them your problems, ask them what they think, what they've heard about different solutions out there. They're going to be way more knowledgeable than just about any other resource out there. Be cautious and just Googling for ISV solutions. A lot of people claim a lot of things, but definitely talk to your partner whenever you can. A lot of them have partner ISVs like us that they work with that they'll happily recommend and have information with. So that is probably your best resource to get information. But again, I think if you're on GP and you've got processes that are causing you problems, talk to your VAR, add a solution in. I think you'll be happy that you did so. So great. We're Mammoth. We've grown. We've gotten to our 65 locations, but that's not the end of the story for them. The time now is they have to keep growing. They keep acquiring. They keep booming. At a certain point, the decision is made internally that they need to move on from GP to BC. So thing one on their end is they have some other 365 systems, a CRM, some things that just integrate better in BC. It's more modern. It's easier to do. That is a big point in the BC column. And then point two, they really wanted a web first environment. They didn't want a giant server closet somewhere full of GP machines. They wanted to modernize that. And, directly from them, while they were shopping for it, they had to make sure that they brought their tools with them, right? So bringing Fidesk along was a must. And, working with an ISV who actually understands what's going on and making sure that, that transition goes smoothly was one of their highest priorities. So again, I feel pretty fortunate to be a part of that project to help them make that migration and help them bring those things along. And I know that they also brought Mem along for the ride too, as they've got Mem set up in BC. So I would assume they have some other products that I'm not as close to, but I'm not sure if you looked at that ahead of time, Khaled, but I would imagine they've got some other binary streams floating around. So BC generally gave them what they were looking for, right? So they're fully web-based, they're fully scalable, they can always add more users, they can add more transactions, and it's completely future-proof at this point. Microsoft has gone all in on Business Central and the other F&O, the other modern ERPs that are in the cloud. They're all in on them, and you set this up now and you get a really good system in place, you're set. I don't think you need to worry about any drastic changes that interrupt your ability to process transactions for decades. Realistically, Microsoft is about as all in on this as they are on anything. I'm not sure you'd agree with that sentiment or not, Khaled, but it certainly seems like they are.
We heard it loud and clear that BC was the fastest growing app within BizApps for the past year. So it's definitely a big area of investment, I think.
Yeah. And there are more tools getting added every day to that marketplace too, which is where we're going next on this is, all right, for BC specifically, how is that software stack that can scale as well? Like I mentioned or alluded to, scaling in BC, you just have to add users essentially. If you have more users, add them, the backend is going to scale automatically. You don't have to think about it. You might slightly alter your monthly recurring fees from them, but you don't have to manage it. You don't need an IT team to be in charge of it. But that said, you do still need a partner to help you out. They can help guide you. They can make sure that everything that you're adding makes sense, that kind of see the big picture and have recommendations for you. The other huge benefit on it, like Mammoth alluded to when I was talking to them, is if you want to integrate with the other modern 365 products, BC is specifically built to do that sort of thing. Makes it really easy. It's basically just connected. You just have to set up the the types of things that you want to integrate. But the thing that came up when I was working with them that is a opportunity to improve on the OCR side of things and the data capture side of things based on the built-in is BC is lacking some basic like automation in terms of coding and setting up defaults for transactions. And that's something that a third party ISV such as Fidesic can really help out with, in terms of helping automate that coding and automate that data capture. So, you don't have more work just because you can't set up as many defaults. If you want to add ISV solutions to your BC to help you grow the types of things that we talked about here today, AppSource is definitely a great starting spot to kind of shop around and see what's going on there. You can filter by supports BC. That means they've gone through at least some sort of a rigorous process at Microsoft to make sure that the integration is good, that it is fully supported. It's a great starting point. The same things that we talked about before still apply here. Fidesic has all the same features that we talked about on the earlier GP slides in terms of data capture and outsourcing your ACH and paper checks. We've also got a workflow, which gives you a few extra features that might not be built into BC directly. And then we've got your mem stack or your binary stream stack of things where you've got your subscription billing, and subscription billing has been huge for you guys in BC space, right?
Yeah, 100%. Everyone's moving there, right?
Yeah, which can also come up in franchise world. Depends on it. That's whatever the type of franchise you are, right? I'm sure there's situations. And then the point to drive home, which is easy to sort of forget in BC world where everything is point and click and you can add things all willy-nilly if you really want to your ERP stack. Still check with your partner on this stuff. Still have a partner advising you. I don't recommend anybody try to go it alone on just adding ISV solutions. You can't really do it in GP, but you probably could if you really wanted to in BC. I still don't recommend it. It's important to have somebody who understands like the back end of how things are going to connect together, put together a plan that doesn't create more work. And that's definitely something that I've seen over the years too, is people will integrate solutions in ways that don't make any sense to me. Where now you've got to manage two systems, or now you've got to manage a whole new connection, or just because a solution is good on paper does not mean it's good for your business, and does not mean that it's going to make sense in the greater context of things. So definitely reach out to your partner, the partner network on that front. They will be happy to, vet some ISVs for you and help out in that front. So that is all I have scheduled for today. So the conclusion essentially on this is you've got options. You can, in the land of GP, you've got options to add on to make yourself set up for growth. Focus on those things that are manually intensive and don't add value to your business. So switching companies all day does not add value. Keying in invoices does not add value. There are things that just don't make sense to throw people at. And given the current climate, it doesn't make much sense really to invest in that at all. So I will stop this recording. We're going to post this so you can share this to other people here shortly. So, and then get to QA. So thanks a lot for joining us, Khaled. I always appreciate you hopping on and kind of providing some insight. It's always nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's awesome. And it's good to see people getting some benefit from this. I think the insights you shared are great. And it's good to see Mammoth's success on both platforms now with us.
Yeah, it feels good to have a nice win on both sides of things, right? That, it speaks to the value of the different solutions that are out there. So I'll stop and throw it to QA if we have any, just so you guys can ask questions without worrying about showing up in a YouTube video. But thanks to all for attending. And if you got some questions, shoot them in the chat. I'll hang out for a bit and get them answered. So thanks all. Take care.